Welcome, Built Right listeners. Today, we're thrilled to have a special guest, Bo Brown, the Director of Product Management at NCR Voyix, a global leader in the fintech world, a local Atlanta company here as well. Our focus today, though, is unraveling the intricate kind of differences of product management in large organizations. And NCR been around since, I think, 1884, so very large, to small startups and scale-ups. Like, what's the difference there with product management? And then towards the end, we're going to get into how the future is being shaped in product management with some of the crazy changes going on with AI. So make sure you stay tuned for that. But welcome to the show, Bo.
No, thanks for having me. Product is my passion. I have been in product for 20 years now, driving strategy for large organizations, mostly fintechs, but a little bit agnostic around a couple of industries, but it's all been around real-time processing and data.
Yeah, and we're kindred spirits, I think. My original background is in product. I love product folks. I love how product people think. But let me hit you with kind of maybe a deeper, like, philosophical question. What is the purpose of product management, and what is good product management in your book?
Sure. To me, product management is the role that is trying to solve a problem that the market is willing to pay for. You hear a lot of things are asked for, but when you try to price it or drive revenue, it becomes a little bit harder that way. And one of the reasons I fell into product is I went from a small startup doing sales, where the president of the company, the vice president of sales, the VP of engineering, all sat in the same room. It's entrepreneurially led. They had the vision. But as I went to larger companies, they really have too many functional areas competing for what needs to be done. And product is that role to help prioritize a market vision or from an outside in perspective of what we need to be doing, being the product CEO, trying to make those decisions and run it like a business.
Yeah, and that first point you made there is so critical. And I think so many people miss this. It's what the market's willing to bear. It's the pain point that the market has. It's what's the famous quote? Everybody has a plan until you get punched in the face. Yeah. Mike Tyson. It's that kind of idea. And the product folks, that's why I love them. They're in the trenches. They're helping to find the strategy, the features that you need, all the fun stuff, while building something that's actually viable for the business. I think that's a piece that gets forgotten a lot of the times. Any thoughts there just on the viability piece that sometimes gets overlooked?
Sure. For some odd reason, it's really hard to be the outside in product manager where you have enough market expertise that you can say, here's the problem, here's how I see it, here's the return on investment if they spend on this. Instead, organizations, especially large ones, want to suck you into the weeds of execution and getting things done and turning them on, and then grinding the sausage through the large organizations to get legal to approve it, to get marketing to update collateral, to do sales training. It's a lot of internal focus, when anybody that would show you a best practices book would say product should be out of the office, no hito, I believe it is. Nothing interesting happens inside the office. And so it's really, large orgs have, they struggle with that because execution at the same time is very critical as well. And product people tend to own it and drive and have a sense of urgency that some of the other roles don't. So all of a sudden, product's pushing buttons and poking people's sticks to make sure that it gets done, instead of maybe handing it off and then going back out in the market and trying to solve the next problem. Yeah,
and you mentioned it's that metaphor is like stuck in my head now of the sausage making in the large organization. You hope it comes out the other side tasting like something good and not something a bit foul. Let's segue there. We're getting into this idea of working in a very large organization and running product is different than working in kind of a startup or scale up environment. And you've been someone that's done both. Where do you think maybe we start with what's the biggest difference between the two in your mind?
I would say it is the breadth and scale of inertia for a large
Mm,
organization. Smaller orgs normally have one product, maybe two products.
yeah.
Everybody's passionate, everybody understands it. But the large companies I've worked for have all been made up of acquisitions. So not only do you
Mhm.
have suites of products, often sometimes competing against each other in the market, let alone internally, you have different cultures, you have different systems that don't play well together. You have, and then you have a lot of clients, and really smaller groups are trying to grow through building. And I think, I hate to say it this way, but I think a lot of large companies grow through acquisition. So they're not risk tolerant enough to try to build new things inside often.
Yeah, it's that you hit it. It's hard to shift a giant ship as it's moving. It's the innovator's dilemma when something new hits the market. Sometimes you got to upend your whole business model there. But you hit on an interesting point. I wasn't even thinking of this, but small company, it's the product, it's a product. Large company, it's portfolio of products. Like what does that look like? How does that differ, whether it's the management structure or how you're thinking in this kind of portfolio mindset versus here's our one thing and this is all we do?
Yeah, it definitely complicates it. It makes it a matrixed organization because
Yeah.
not only is there one director of product or one VP of product, there are 20 VPs of products or 30 directors of product.
Yeah.
And aligning those goals, because often the advantage of having a portfolio is to build into some sort of suite of offerings that all work well, right? So
Mm-hmm.
the pitches, the integration is always a challenge. We already pre-integrate and all these things. Well, doing that internally is still hard. Now we try to hide that ugly from the end customer or the merchant, but it's still there. We're just handling it on their behalf. I think what's really interesting is because the groups get so large and powerful, they have real needs and agendas. I'll give a primary example. Jason Brett from Product Coffee taught us the 60-second business case a long time ago. Just a neat
Mm-hmm.
way to prioritize. Could be a backlog of features, it could be a backlog of projects. Just puts it in an order. And I had to use that tool to go in front of the VP of support, the VP of engineering, the general manager of the group, and say, "Hey guys, they can't all be number one. Help me. I'm willing to build whatever you need to be
Mm-hmm.
built, but you're all saying different things." And so it helped create some alignment because they all have real needs that are pain points internally, let alone in the market.
I'd be curious, what's I've never heard of that, the 60-second. What's
Sure.
kind of the breakdown there?
It's a decision matrix. It tries to take some of the science of product management and
Yeah.
add a little bit of the art as well. Looking at net new revenue, retained revenue, innovation
Mm,
factor. Are you the first to market with it? Does it create some buzz? Does it make any cost savings? And then an interesting one that I think we could talk about is what percentage of your customer base is this feature or project going to impact? Because everybody knows there's always one large client that says they have to have a sunroof.
yeah. Yeah, that's
And
right.
all of a sudden, some executive promised them a sunroof, and all of a sudden that floats to the top of the list, and no one else wants it. Their windows work fine, the air conditioner works fine. And this was just a way to score everything. You could weight those models. I'm happy to share it with you or and your audience. And it just helps. And it's called the 60-second business case because at least in large companies, you can never get enough data to do a real business case.
Yeah.
So this helps organize what's most important, and then you take off the top any other backlog and start to flesh out with more detail the most important things, most impactful things.
Yeah. Yeah. It's that kind of weighted aspect to prioritization. So I got about like 5 different angles that I want to go down now off of that. The first one, though, just for the audience, this triggered one thought. It's a past episode in the methodology we have called MVR, minimal viable replacement. But it's the idea of if you're modernizing something existing, what triggered to me was your sunroof comment. Like you got to be cognizant of who your customers are and what their current workflows are. Because we see a lot of times where somebody's modernizing something, they take the MVP approach, and it's the analogy of, oh, we're going to do skateboard to bicycle to car, which I love. But if your customer that's accounting for 80% of your revenue expects a car with the sunroof and the Bluetooth and all that, and you give them a skateboard and say, hey, go ride down the highway, it may not work out so good. But for the listeners, go check that out. Google MVR, minimal viable replacement. But the area I want to get into next, you're hitting on kind of the internal politics when you're in a large organization. So small company, you're basically just working in that small group, like you mentioned, working towards the vision, prioritizing. But large organization, you have all varying business units, different stakeholders. How does that start to come into play when you're in product in a large organization?
I think it changes your approach to getting things done. You have to do a better job socializing it and getting buy-in. Smaller orgs, a lot of the product vision comes from the entrepreneurs, comes from the founders, the originators, or you have a lot of direct relationship with that. Now, almost taking a business case to a group of leaders, it's almost cold to them, but potentially. So you have to make sure prior to the pitch that you've explained to them, shared with them, get someone from their team to say, yeah, they agree it's important, to have a key salesperson say, yes, I could sell that, and do a little bit better job of, and I don't want to call it politics, but it's really, and socializing is probably a better term, because if they've never heard of it, they've got other squeaky wheels, you're going to have a hard time winning. But it does widen the number of pools you have to sell. I'm a former sales guy. I love sales, so I'm not really a technologist like some of the other people, but you have to be able to change the way your pitch sells to sales. This is going to make it easy for you to hit your quota. Support, this is going to eliminate calls. Operations, this is easy to train on. It's simple. You have to talk the language of each of those functional areas to get the buy-in and get their head nod to move forward.
Yeah. And for any young product managers we have out there, socialize. Remember that, because I've done it before, and it sounds like you have, obviously, too. You run into the buzzsaw of presenting a business case for the first time to a group that hasn't seen it before. Always smart in a large organization. Just talk to them about it, run it by, because you're going to get good feedback, and you'll probably think about things that you didn't think about before, because there's a lot of intricacies in large organizations. What drives them? What metrics are they worried about? What's going on in their organization? So any young product managers, consider that socializing beforehand. It's a great approach there.
I worked for a large Fortune 6 healthcare technology company, and one of their groups related to pharmacy, and we had a quarterly business planning meeting where you got in front and you pitched your business cases, and it was a little bit like Shark Tank. People wanted to know, how was that going to impact EBITDA? Why that over something else? And it made you be in business shape, where you had to get in there and defend and do your homework before the meeting, because if you didn't, you would never know what they're going to ask or what they care about.
Yeah. And another lesson for young product managers, we got a whole course going from Bo today. Learn how to read a P&L. So that's a big one. The other one you said, though, that caught me was, like, talk to the sales guys or gals and ask them, can you sell this? What's your take on it? Because at the end of the day, no matter what you come up with, they got to be able to go out and execute on it. And what I loved, you hit on some points of, what's the point of value? You didn't talk anything about feature XYZ. You talked about value. I'm reducing cost. I'm increasing efficiency, whatever it may be. Maybe go deeper there, that connection point of value and product.
Sure. So two parts are, especially in large companies, you have to speak the language of business, which is the P&L. You have to ideally make the money, potentially save the money, and at a minimum impact their customer experience or their net promoter score. And those are things based on metrics, and they're tangible, and you've got to be able to show them. One of the best pieces of advice I got about being an entrepreneur is before you even start your company, and so I use it in products and I try to run my products entrepreneurially, is you
Mhm.
don't have to build anything. You can call on a prospect and say, hey, are you interested in this widget for $1,000 a month subscription?
Yeah.
And if you can't sell it to somebody, then there's no need to go try to build it. And sales, at least in large orgs, has the most contact with clients and prospects. So working with them, even back to the socialization, you've got to make sure that not only the product is easy for them to sell, because they have a portfolio of solutions to take to market, and they
Mhm.
are, as everyone jokingly says, are coin operated. If you have an easy sale with high margins and high commissions, and someone's trying to launch a product that is complicated, not as high a revenue potential and
Yeah.
lower commissions, you can't even get sales to take it to market, even if there is a need.
Yeah.
Some of the ways I've solved that is literally through bundling. I've
Mhm.
managed key products. I've also managed suites of secondary products, whether it's risk scoring, fraud, chargebacks, some compliance products. It's hard to get your foot in the door to talk to somebody about that. So one of the unique ways I think I handle it is start to build out bundles. It's easier
Yeah.
for sale. It raises the total revenue or the total contract value for sales. It makes it easier to sell. A lot of these clients want it, but if you're trying to go back in later and sell a small item, it's hard to get the priority out of those stakeholders externally as well to add an amendment or do something that has to re-involve everybody. So do it once if you can.
Yeah, another good kind of go-to-market motion there, the bundling, especially if you're in that large organization where you do have a suite of products. All right, getting into the hot topic right now, AI, right? AI has been around for seemingly a very long time, right? But over the past year, this concept of generative AI has started to bubble up. What's your take, whether it's the generative aspect of the new thing, the new shiny object, or just AI in general? What's your thought of how it's impacting either product management or it's just potential in general, whether that's in your business at NCR or other areas of opportunity?
Sure, I can talk about both of those. So I am
Mhm.
fortunate enough to manage a team that supports our analytics solution.
Yeah.
That's Power BI and Azure, and it's merchant services or credit card processing. And so I'm not building AI or generative AI. I'm using it to help solve problems. So I have a very
Mhm.
pragmatic approach. I don't work in a company that's trying to map the human genome or put somebody on
Yeah.
Mars. I
Yeah.
work with people, often assistant managers for a bar that's trying to close their books at 2 in the morning and they don't know where the money is and they're not
Mhm.
CPAs. I'm trying to use natural language. I'm trying to use machine learning to see trends
Mhm.
and put that in a simple context because I'm all about the user experience. If they can't use it or it's not simple, then it's not done correctly. To help balance their books between their point of sale, their gateway, their processing engine, and their bank settlement. Um, so I think there's a lot of value there. One of your former podcasts, Nick, the Greek, I would slaughter his last name, I think, kind of
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good one.
said, and I really liked his quote, which was AI is doing what you need to be doing, and you could do if you had unlimited time and resources. So
Mhm.
culling through all that data is really challenging to see a trend. So we're using AI to help assist people say, hey, on holidays, your sales goes up or your sales go down, things like that. So it's very pragmatic, and that's what our customers want. And so I see that being nothing but beneficial to companies and our merchants. On the flip side, internally, it's great for product people.
Yeah.
Data is key as well. We can then aggregate it and roll up from one individual store or a chain or a merchant and start to see trends and patterns and start to say, hey, we see you have a large number of chargebacks. We think
Mhm.
this fraud tool would help save you money. So it's a sales opportunity for us to sell an additional service, but it's also solves a market need, and that's what I've been talking about the whole time.
Yeah.
The second part, I'm going to get a little bit more internal, is I feel a lot of product marketing has become more comms, and product managers have always had to create the value prop for what you're selling and help sales understand it and marketing sell it. But I think there's more and more pressure on product to own that and marketing to send it out.
Mm-hmm.
And I see AI starting to be a great way to put together a lot of collateral, campaigns.
Yeah.
So combining that with some analysis of your own data and trends, you could really, I think, start to hammer home messages that were impactful to your clients.
Yeah, that's great. And for anybody listening that heard Nick the Greek, so Nick, it was episode 17, if everybody's curious. So Nick is the head of research and ML at Relational AI, episode 17. But he gets into like how generative AI actually works. It's one of my favorite episodes. So a must listen there. But you hit on one point though. It's like you called it a pragmatic approach to AI. It's sometimes the most mundane things that can drive huge impact in the business. Like I'll give you an example. My brother-in-law and wife have a floral business. So they do flowers for big weddings and events and things like that. And I've been playing around with GPTs, like creating custom GPTs. And a pain point they have is in their proposal process. They have to write it up by hand every time, figuring out how many flowers I need, and I got to make it sound good for the price tag I'm putting on it and all that. But what they have is they have previous proposals, so I can feed that into the GPT. I can give it context for what questions I need to answer to develop a proposal. And you can create this GPT. So I'm working with them to try to do this just for fun and have it to where, okay, instead of spending several hours writing a proposal, which is not the skill set of the person writing it, right? They're a designer, they're creative. Now they can just interface with this bot and have it spit out the proposal. But it's like a very mundane writing proposals. But which is the best thing to automate, right?
Yeah, no, those are the tasks that I focus on automating. And again, I would love to work in something really sexy and cool, but at the end of the day, fintech is about moving money. It's very critical. People get very emotional about it, and it has to be done. And to do it, you have to pay attention to a lot of details across a lot of mundane tasks of ticking and tying and accounting work that most people aren't accountants and don't want to do it. If you're a small business owner in the restaurant world, you have inventory, you have staffing, you have customers. The last thing you want to do is spend every night trying to figure out where your money is. So we are using it to say, hey, this is a chargeback. Not only is it a chargeback, but add value to it, saying we don't think you should dispute this one. It's not worth it. This chargeback was from a catering order for $500. You need to dispute it. The vision, so I'm still honestly in a lot of the walk stage of building it out at NCR, but the vision to get to the running and sprinting is start to build really an opt-in-less loyalty solution where we can start to take your data and understand who you are and know that you like to get dessert, know that you come in on anniversaries, and start to build that out from a loyalty perspective on top of, it sounds simple, but there's still, CRM really struggles to know if you're a shoe store, what size shoe you wear. And they should know. It sounds mundane, it is, but it's really important to the customer that they have a sense that you know who they are.
And I think that's the crazy unlock for me is with the latest stuff going on is to have developed this LLM large language model past, like it was just so expensive, time intensive. But now these companies like OpenAI and Llama with Facebook and all those, now people have access to those. So it's democratized it a bit. I think what's going to be really interesting is how people start to leverage those. Like you mentioned data and access to data. Like I've been playing around with it a bit where you feed ChatGPT a large data set and you start asking it questions and it like unbelievably. It's like giving you these insights. I even did one where it's okay, you are a data scientist, and I was like asking it to do stuff that's above my head, above my pay grade, but just like k-means clustering and random forest and like these different data science type of things, and it's actually going in and doing it. It's mind-blowing. But how does that equate to an NCR scale type of organization? I think that's where there's probably still a bit of a gap to go from here to there, but it'll be really interesting, I think.
I think it's coming. I think the product community that supports these open AI platforms are doing it great because they're making it user friendly. For you don't need to be a data PhD to get in there and mess with it.
Yeah.
So first, is usability is there. The data, like you said, you're playing around with it and able to dive in. I will tell you on the flip side, large companies in general are very risk averse about sharing data, sharing anything strategic with open source items or non-proprietary items. Not just NCR, most companies won't let me dump client data into third-party tools, especially if they're not a preferred vendor, signed contracts, NDAs, etc. And I think rightfully there is risk that you don't. So it's a little bit slower in the large orgs for those things to come in. They all talk about it. They all know it's important, but they're still trying to figure out how much to open the kimono to let individuals inside the company start playing around.
Especially because you have some of these large companies like your open AIs, and they're backed by Microsoft and the big dogs, but then you have some of these smaller one-off AI tools. And I think that's even more critical. Be cautious what data you're feeding in there, because how are they using it? How secure is it? So I think that's a definite concern. I think the approach we're taking at Hatchworks is just start playing around with it. Just start testing it, whether it's dummy data. Then you get some like proof of concepts that can start sparking light bulbs in people's heads. And then you get to the tough question of, okay, how do we use this securely and all the quote unquote fun stuff.
And then from a product perspective is how do you monetize it? Because you can do a lot of fun, neat things, but is there a need in the market to pay for it? I'm starting to see it pop around in general apps, which is great.
Yeah.
But it's been a free value add, which is again great for me, the end consumer, but it's probably a large spend for the company providing it. And that works in the innovative cycle, but at some point it's got to be monetized.
And that's another interesting point. And I love you having the product kind of mindset, right? Because it all comes down to first principles. Are you delivering value? And I think it's kind of like the .com wave. We've seen a million Gen AI companies pop up, and each new feature that ChatGPT or whatever starts to release, their value just immediately gets erased because they don't have a moat or differentiated value in a sense. It still comes down to that at the end of the day, to your point. So really good call out there.
I'm excited it's as open as it is, because I think it'd be devastating if you only a few people had the keys or it was very expensive. But at the same time, creating one, everybody can create an app kind of. And it'll be like the App Store at some point where there's millions of apps and you can't even find the one you're looking for. So it'll be interesting. I do think it's transformational. I'm not a Luddite by any means and think it's going to destroy the world yet. But I do think it's going to have a lot of impact on how the world works. And I already see it coming, really. It's been amazingly fast of the impact it's had.
Yeah, it'll be a fun ride for sure. Bo, thanks for being on the Built Right podcast. For all of our listeners, where can they find you? Is it LinkedIn the best spot, or any other areas that folks can find you?
It's just Bo Brown on LinkedIn, and happy to connect and talk to you about it, and then talk to you about product, and hope to see you in the Atlanta product community.
Awesome. Thanks for being on, Bo.
Thanks, Matt.